What's up, everybody? Welcome to Mixed Marvel Arts, your go-to channel for all things MMA and comic books. Today's comic book review is on issue number 6 of The Amazing Spider-Man. Last issue we saw Flash Thompson dress up as Spider-Man to prank Peter, only to get kidnapped by Doctor Doom and eventually rescued by the real Spider-Man and Fantastic Four. This issue features the origin and first appearance of the Lizard, who was the main villain in the 2012 Amazing Spider-Man movie. I think it was a good Spider-Man movie, and personally, I did enjoy Andrew Garfield's take on Spider-Man, but I think this comic does a better job at humanizing the Lizard and showing us who he really is. So let's dive into it now. As always, we start off with a great full-page layout by Steve Ditko, and this one is just as good as we've come to expect. Then we're introduced to the Lizard, who's been terrorizing people in the swamps of Florida's Everglades. He even breaks a tree in half with his hands. It's clear that he'd be a tough test for Spider-Man. And in New York City, Jonah Jameson publicly challenges Spider-Man to defeat the Lizard. So Peter Parker visits Jameson to ask if he'll send him on a trip to Florida to snap some pictures of the Lizard. But Jameson denies his request, so Peter will have to find some other way to take down the Lizard. Then Peter and Betty have a brief conversation before Peter heads to the Natural History Museum to learn more about lizards. Peter runs into Flash and Liz there too, but he soon notices two thieves. He changes into Spider-Man while the criminals take Liz as their hostage to avoid getting arrested. Spider-Man beats the criminals with ease and rescues Liz Allen, who then develops a crush on Spider-Man. So basically, Peter completely ruined Flash's date with Liz Allen. Then Peter refocuses his attention on getting a ticket to Florida so he can go after the Lizard. He visits Jameson again, but as Spider-Man this time. Spidey says he's accepting the challenge to take on the Lizard, and tells Jameson he'd better send a great photographer to cover the story. When Peter returns to the Daily Bugle, Jonah Jameson reveals he's sending Peter to Florida, but he's coming along with him. Jonah Jameson always finds a way to make life more difficult for Peter and his life as Spider-Man. When the two land in Florida, Peter ditches Jonah Jameson to head out as Spider-Man. I think it would have been hilarious if Jonah Jameson made it even more difficult on him by saying he wanted to go with Peter so that he could keep an eye on him for the whole trip. But the story was still handled very well even without this. Spidey goes after the Lizard, who grabs the unsuspecting Spider-Man and pulls him into a swamp. And it turns out, Peter thought the Lizard was just a guy wearing a disguise all along. But once he sees his tail, he realizes it's a real human lizard. The Lizard whips Spider-Man half a mile away, and he lands right by Dr. Curtis Connor's house. Peter had intended to visit Dr. Connors anyhow, because he's a reptile expert. He goes to warn his family that the Lizard is nearby, and that's when Martha Connors, Kurt Connors' wife, reveals that her husband Kurt is the Lizard. He lost an arm during World War II and wanted to create a serum that would allow humans to regrow limbs, just like some lizards. This was both to regrow his own arm, but also to benefit the rest of mankind and make his son Billy proud. Dr. Connors was a good guy, but when he tested the serum on himself, he turned into a giant lizard soon after his arm did in fact grow back. He tried to create a new serum to revert himself back into a human, but his intelligence had drastically decreased after turning into the Lizard. He gave up and ran away from his family in order to protect them. But then he returns to see his family at this moment, which scares his son Billy, and Spider-Man comes to rescue him. The Lizard runs away again when he hears his wife Martha's voice. He's embarrassed to face her like this. And Spider-Man uses his science skills again in this issue, this time to create a serum that will revert the Lizard back into Dr. Connors. Then the Lizard breaks in and attacks Spider-Man. It seems that the longer he remains the Lizard, the more evil and less human he becomes. The Lizard leaves to feed his serum to other reptiles in order to create a reptile army, while Spider-Man starts tracking him down to stop this. He soon finds him, but decides he has to revert the Lizard back into Dr. Connors without hurting him. He's still a good person with a family after all. And the human side of the Lizard is one of my favorite parts of this story. Like I said before, I enjoyed the Amazing Spider-Man movie, but I think it could have been even better if they included Martha and Billy Connors in it. That would have made the Lizard a more complete character. But as for the comic, Spider-Man and the Lizard have gotten into an intense battle. Spider-Man's able to use his speed and agility to avoid most of the Lizard's attacks, and he pulls the Lizard off the wall along with him. While in the air, he pulls out the serum and forces it upon the Lizard, but he continues attacking Spidey. Turns out it had a delayed effect, and the Lizard does eventually turn back into Dr. Connors. Spider-Man brings him back home and promises to keep the whole thing a secret. Martha and Kurt Connors are extremely thankful for everything Spider-Man did for them, and this just makes him an even greater superhero if you ask me. Peter finally returns to J.J. Jameson after defeating the Lizard and presents him with new pictures, but Jameson rips them all up and claims they're fake. So the whole trip was for nothing in the end for J. Jonah Jameson. And then Peter returns to New York and calls Liz up for a date, but she turns him down and claims she's waiting for a call from Spider-Man. So Peter can't even date Liz, and it's all because she has a crush on Spider-Man. It's a pretty funny ending to the issue, and shows just how bad Peter Parker's luck can be sometimes. Now he's competing against himself to get a date with Liz Allen. It was a great idea by Stan Lee, and an amazing overall issue. I think the Lizard was a great villain, and everything else in the issue was awesome too. One of the best parts was the look on Peter's face when he finds out J.J. Jameson is coming with him to Florida. So I'm going to rate this issue a 9 out of 10. What did you think of the issue? And the ending revealed that the Vulture will be returning in the next one. What are your predictions for how Spider-Man will defeat him this time? As always, I'll be reviewing that issue as well. And since we also talked about the Amazing Spider-Man movie in this video, I want to know what your thoughts are on Andrew Garfield's take on Peter Parker and his movie overall, the first and second one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you want to hear from me more often, follow the link in the video description to my Twitter and follow me on there. And if you want to see more comic reviews, then as always, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and I will see you guys in my next video.